Hollow Knight, one of the best rated Metroidvanias of all time, and a game that has left such a big mark on the gaming landscape and internet, with every other Metroidvania after being inspired by it in one form or another. And Sekiro, From Software's first game of the year that changed the entire combat we used to expect from Soulsborne titles on its head, with some of the best fights of the entire franchise to this day. Okay, now draw them giving birth. 9 Souls, the 9th installment in the Souls franchise. I meant to say, an indie game released in 2024 by Red Candle Games, and I consider it to be one of the best releases of last year. With an art style that is beautifully crafted, giving birth to this Chinese spiritual futuristic setting where you are an immortal being seeking revenge on an island spacecraft. Yes, too much to digest, but we'll get to it. Its combat is fast-paced, relying a lot on your ability to parry and evade attacks to bring the feeling of intense combat to its fullest, while not forgetting to create good level designs to also satiate our feeling of curiosity and exploration, which can only be found in good Metroidvanias. Also, the narrative is bound to hook you up, since everything is centered around an unknown disease afflicting an entire race, with a council of scientists trying to find a cure and an origin for this disease, where we explore a lot of different approaches on how to cure it, the downsides of each approach, and people's belief in what this disease means, all through the lenses of science and religion, and how different people and governments would react to an impending doom like that. But let's be honest, do I really need to convince you to play this game? Have you seen the gameplay trailer for this? Yeah, I mean, I'm about to give all of my opinions about the game, but it'll be hard to convince you if that trailer just didn't make you feel anything. I decided to check this game out because of 2 keywords I saw people throwing around: Sekiro and Hollow Knight. Many reviewers seem to be comparing it to those titles, and luckily for the game, those are my favorite games, so I decided to give 9 Souls a try. Now, I'll be honest, for some of you guys the comparison to Sekiro and Hollow Knight will be doing some heavy lifting, since opposite to those games, this game has a slower start. When we look into Hollow Knight, the game wastes no time in giving you the freedom to walk around, giving you a little exposition and hardly stopping you to present dialogues and chat bubbles. In less than 2 hours, you probably already went through different biomes, met some fun NPCs, and probably got introduced to new mechanics. Another thing that those games don't possess is a lot of lore being presented to you. Now, these games have a lot of lore, they just don't waste time trying to explain it clearly to you. You mostly have to piece it on your own by reading item descriptions, so if you have no interest in the lore, that doesn't affect the pacing. Or better yet, even if you have interest, you have the freedom to decide when you want to delve into it and at which pace. This is not the case for 9 Souls, where it heavily stops your flow to let characters chat, to present you with the plot of the game, to teach you the controls of the game, and so on. I'm just not a big fan of that. This makes the game more approachable for other players, but to me, it detracts from the more personal experience you can have with the game. It leaves out the opportunity for you to discover things on your own, and to me, it negatively affected the early pacing. The game already had an insane premise. From the starting cutscene, you understand there is someone you want to fight against, that you've lost and that now you will retry it. And because this is a video game, you can also expect to acquire power-ups and become stronger for your second try. So being interrupted by different NPCs that I barely know, or the game explaining me basic controls, without being able to create any momentum in gameplay definitely bummed me out. It was only around the 2-hour mark when I finally felt like the tutorial had finished and I was given more freedom to approach the game. Also, the plot and the universe might not captivate everyone at first, since it represents a mix of ancient East Asian mythology with highly futuristic technology. I think the mixing of the two didn't feel right at the beginning, and it took some time for it to develop into something interesting, but they can receive some credit for definitely being a more unique setting that hasn't been seen much before, and we'll get to that later. I think something that affects both the universe and the pacing is the amount of extensive dialogue with multiple characters right from the start that can make you feel a little bit lost. Rather than introducing characters slowly, giving more room for their relevancy in the plot and universe, the game introduces you a lot of characters, with most of them presenting one-sided personalities, not allowing you to connect and care for them. This is probably comes as a side effect from making many of the initial characters play some sort of role in the mechanics of the game, with most of them being used as a medium for you to buy, upgrade, learn, or change new abilities and skills, making them feel more like workbenches than real characters. I think this comes from their inspiration from Hollow Knight, where NPCs played a lot of similar roles, such as the Beetle that gave you maps, the Charm Lover that gives you talismans, the Train Stag that allowed for fast travels, and so on. Well, from the amount of criticism I gave you, you might be wondering why I even decided to review this game. But just wait, I'm going for an enemy to lovers narrative, okay? To reiterate what I said, those were my opinions when I started the game. Now, after having finished the game, I have the hindsight to see what they were aiming for. Also, spoilers ahead, I'm not going to talk about anything major or anything relevant, but I will have to explain some things that you will only experience after some hours into the game. If you want to play without spoilers, skip this section. Like here, take this timestamp. There I'll talk more about gameplay, so go there. First, I want to address the amount of NPCs and dialogues. As I discussed it, they introduced a lot of NPCs at the beginning, but after that, they all introduced new bosses. Meaning that all the characters that are going with you on your journey are already introduced. And because they are introduced so early, 90% of the game will occur with you interacting with them, delivering them items, having chats, and seeing them open up more. This is effective because we get to see a development in our edgy and hot-headed protagonist, where we see them opening up and explaining their reasoning and sentiments to each other. This is really good exposition since it doesn't feel forced, or in a way that would be unnatural to the player, such as us being able to read his thoughts. No, we are in the dark about our character's thoughts, motivations, and behavior, just as any other NPC in the game. So when our protagonist opens up, we are bound to feel like he's also opening up to us and developing a bond. And let me say, all of the characters we interact feel so human and fill in a needed role for our protagonist to connect with. Take the stupid kid that I used to hate, Xuan Xuan. The protagonist, Yi, develops a care for him, since after being killed at the beginning of the game, Xuan Xuan is the one who cares for us. Through him, we see the caring side of Yi, and how much he cares for this kid's development, bringing him lots of toys, things to study, art to create, music to listen to, plants to grow, and so on. This exchange also allows Yi to better connect with his inner child, who has been neglected since he grew up too early, being obsessed with studying and proving his self-worth. And this gives the player better insight into what made Yi who he is, and why he holds some morals and ideas so strongly. And this is not exclusive only for this character, no, there's a lot of them. For example, Shenong, a man from the village, acts as an equal to Yi. He also possesses a unique trait/skill, he's hot-headed, and has been somewhat isolated from his people, all characteristics present in Yi. Through him, we can reflect on one another, and that allows them to see the error in their ways. Since normally, when we are analyzing ourselves, we tend to believe we are in the right, a pesky thing called ego gets in the way. But only once we see someone behaving in the same way, that we can finally be able to remove our cognitive bias towards ourselves. So having an equal to Yi helps him grow as a person and change his ways. Now, to not spoil too much about the character developments we have in the game, I'll try to give a brief resume on how they interact with other characters. Because, just these two examples might not have convinced you yet about how good they do their characters in this game, so let me give you some more. Abacus is a computer assisting Yi. He allows us to see Yi's intellect and more logical side, while Abacus himself shows a lot more emotions than Yi normally does, creating this contrast that Yi is far removed from his own humanity, that even a machine is capable of showing more emotions than him. Shanghai is a cryptic robot that appeared in Yi's room. He doesn't reveal a lot at the beginning, creating this sense of curiosity in the player to collect more maps, to further develop his mystery. But this also helps us connect with the more curious side of Yi, allowing both the player and the character to be invested in uncovering this robot story. Chio is a robotic weapon that has developed self-awareness and now dedicates its existence to being a scholar. He is really interesting because even though he is created for killing and bloodlust, he ends up becoming something in absolute contrast to what his original purpose was. and it works as an interesting opposition to what Yi is, since Yi himself is more focused on revenge and is immersed in his own bloodlust. And lastly, Kwafu, Yi's best friend and also a soul. He works well to give us a glimpse into Yi's past, since he has known him for a long time, but also to allow Yi to act differently, since he is already way more comfortable close to him. And yes, all those NPCs also play a role in your gameplay. And also, all those names are Chinese, so sorry if I'm mispronouncing them, I'm trying my best. I'm trying my best, okay? I swear. Okay, for example, Xuan Xuan is important for the story as previously established, but Shenong allows the player to raise Yi's maximum health. Abacus will always be supporting Yi with analysis through the communication module, aka giving you little tutorials. Shanghai allows the player to uncover maps from the different zones, so it clears up all the fog and you can see where different objectives are on the map. Chiyo sells a lot of Jade upgrades, and Kwafu allows the upgrade of your ranged attacks and healing pipe, your Estus flask in the game. So not only you have these amazing interactions, but also they will have tangible impact on your game. Alright, I think that's all the criticism cover. Yep. Okay, I know. I complain a lot about the mixing of mythological and futuristic settings, but right now I have to say that I love it, exactly because their dichotomy was well explored, since the game makes sure to utilize them as antagonistic forces in the story. Let me explain. Yi is a man who feverishly believes in science above all else, in opposition to his family's more religious belief, while his sister, who he was close to, is a person with a deep connection with religion and to the more mystic side of the universe. The fact that the person he is closest to absolutely doesn't see the world the same as he works wonder in creating conflict and a struggle for the values the protagonist holds. Also, because this entire race is affected by an unknown disease, it helps defy the character ideas that science can explain everything. And as all of them have been unsuccessful so far in developing a cure or discovering a cause, this also captivated me as a player, since, well, I really wanted to see the explanation and if they would be able to find a solution. And better yet, the reveal on how the disease spread/began also adds to the narrative being constructed. I love the twist in this game. I would love to explain everything, but I don't think the narrative is so complex that people playing through the game wouldn't get it. So I think it's best for you to experience it without further spoilers. So please, go play the game, especially if you love this type of drama involving science, with people trying to uncover a disease, developing cures, seeing prototypes fail, and the downside of experiments. Now, what caught my attention from the first second without any complaints was the gameplay. Even without any power-up or skill unlocked, just the basis of what your character could do is pretty interesting. It has a good potential, and it's where the game draws heavy inspiration from Sekiro. Yeah, I know, you've been waiting for me to mention that game since the introduction. The combat in this game relies heavily upon the parry mechanic, since only by parrying can you utilize some unique powers, like an attachable exploding talisman that increases its damage the more you parry. It's kinda like Sekiro, where you have health bar and a stance bar, and parrying gives you damage to the stance bar. Here the stance bar is joined to the health bar. Anytime you perfect parry, it will raise the internal damage in the health bar. And that damage has not yet occurred, but once you use your talisman on the target, it will deal all the internal damage built up. So you are killing the target without really affecting its health, you are building up and then exploding into one single hit. This allows you to be more aggressive and defensive at the same time, since evading/rolling tends to lock you more in the animation frames, heavily tying your momentum, and not allowing you to attack right away after rolling, or to chain rolls together. While the parry allows for minimal recovery frames after successfully parrying, allowing you to parry another attack right away or to return a flurry of attacks. And while it saves your health, it is also building up damage into the enemy. Literally, the best offense is a good offense. The attacks are also easy to read. By adding a little flash of light and a good array of sound design, the game ensures enough cognitive stimuli to develop your reflexes. It feels similar to a dance, since most enemies have their own tempo in which they attack, allowing you to better read their pattern, since you've grown accustomed to when each beat of their attacks will drop. A thing that I have to highlight is that they also know to not rely solely on this parry mechanic, as they also throw in mixes of attacks that are unparryable, forcing you to roll, or even further ahead, some that will require jumping, focusing more on the vertical movement rather than the horizontal that the dodge provides. And from there, you can expect them to build up a lot of mechanics during boss fights. Some air dodges, jump parries, a charged attack, and even a chargeable parry that finally allows you to parry, unironically, unparryable attacks. I like this addition since they enhance different playstyles. For example, against a shield, you would normally fight by working your positioning and getting behind it. That's a more aggressive gameplay. But now, you also have the possibility of playing defensively and charging your attack to break away the shield. The inverse is true for the unparryable attacks. Before, all you could do was play defensively and dodge from it, but with the unbound counter, now you could hold down your parry button and charge it, and once you release it, you will normally parry those unparryable attacks, enhancing the aggressive playstyle, as it allows you now to punish more enemy attacks. Not only that, but this counter also relies more on planning than reflexes because of the prerequisite of charging it while stationary on the ground, so you had to read an unparryable attack as early as possible, or you might not have time to counter it. Back on topic, the combat is well balanced, since most of your attacks don't stagger the enemy, allowing you for a feeling of trading blows rather than each other taking their turn. So much so that even your healing has to come by reading your enemy, since the animation locks you in place, making it easy to be punished if you don't understand what each enemy is capable of. Also, to add to the feeling of difficulty scaling, as the game progresses, each boss and enemy tends to execute larger combos, even adding more mix-ups and different combinations to their attacks. This ensures you are put more into the back foot when fighting against new encounters, since now there is a bigger combo for you to learn, making it more difficult to time attacks, as they might throw a feint or change the last attack of their combo entirely, especially when they mix parryable attacks with unparryable ones. Also, different from other Metroidvanias, the game doesn't allow you to easily recover your health, so playing defensively is way more important. If you mistime your parry, it converts into a block, but if you block damage rather than parrying it, you will still lose some health, but it will recover slowly if you don't take any damage. But if you ever take direct damage again during this time, you will lose this red health, and then the only way of healing will be by using a windpipe, which are low in number and in the amount of health they heal, and can only be recovered in specific places like the bonfires of Dark Souls. So, playing perfectly is still desired, since you can't rely on these healing opportunities that much. The only thing that bothers me about red health is the way it is recovered. Let me compare to something like the approach they did in Bloodborne. There, after you lost some health, you could immediately attack the enemy to recover it. I feel like that would complement this game so much, and actually much later in the game it is possible. There is an equipable upgrade that does exactly that, and I can understand why it's only available later, since it's a little bit too strong if you are good at the game. I think removing your red health after receiving a second attack is a good design, since then the feeling of nailing each parry is preserved. But if this Jade mechanic would be made available earlier, or be turned on by default, at least then the game would present an incentive to act aggressively, since in the current format, you normally won't get any reward from trying to attack the enemy while possessing red health, with the strategy of turtling being the most effective one. Remember, parrying perfectly will already deal internal damage to the enemy, so by only focusing on parrying and not attacking, not only will you recover your red health, but also be dealing damage to the enemy. So there is no point in attacking if you don't have the Jade equipped. I think it would be interesting if this tactic wasn't the only one the game seemed to incentivize earlier on. But okay, let's go back to the concept of difficulty curve. Throughout the game, you will acquire Jades that enhance or interact with different parts of your skills, working similarly to the charms in Hollow Knight. They can affect your talisman, making it hit multiple enemies, or making the detonation process uninterruptible. Others will affect your healing capabilities, increasing the amount of damage converted to internal damage, how fast internal damage starts to heal, the aforementioned Jade that allows you to recover internal damage by attacking, and one that speeds your windpipe use. And of course, ones that impact your damage and parries, such as dealing more damage but costing health, or making charged attacks consume talisman charges to deal more damage. As you can see, different players might want to focus on different things. If you're the type of player who wants to focus on using ranged attacks and parrying, there are tons of talismans that will make your playstyle stronger. The same can be said for super aggressive players who want to pick every talisman that enhances your attacks, or some like myself, who want to play aggressively but since they are not god gamers, will end up picking the ones that increase your ability to recover health, allowing you to recover from mistakes. And of course, this Jade system has slots, so you can't just equip everything. The stronger the effect, the more slots it will cost to equip. So managing your preferred talismans with some less ideal ones can be a fun way to maximize your build preference. Though, if I remember correctly, the only thing boring about Jades is that most of them, if not all, are acquired by buying it from vendors. This is not a bad thing, but I think exploring the world, completing quests and finding secrets to unlock them would have been much more interesting and created a memory linking the Jade to achieving something. I understand that this is not easy from a developer's point of view, since then you have to accommodate your level design, invent puzzles and so on to populate the world with Jades and making them a meaningful experience. While, on the contrary, just putting them on vendors cuts a lot of development time, so I can let that pass. To briefly close my thoughts on combat, let's talk about the skill tree. The skill tree is less about customization, since not only it's some of the more basic upgrades like more damage, more health, and so on, but eventually you can unlock the entire tree. But what felt interesting is in which way you would normally unlock things. For example, I didn't like the fact that I had to hold and cast to make my talismans explode. And once I looked into the skill tree and saw there was an upgrade that allowed my talismans to blow up on their own, but with the downside of it always costing one charge, making it deals less damage, I was dead center into unlocking it first, since I knew it would allow me to play aggressively and keep dodging and hitting, rather than having to stop and explode my talisman. Also, because of my aggressive playstyle, I searched for upgrades that would allow me to deal more damage, so once again, this is a system that will enhance your character as a whole, but you can still choose where to allocate your points first, allowing for a little bit of personal preference. I think something any Metroidvania needs to have or to achieve success is a good level design with some amazing art, and Nine Souls has both. The map is somewhat linear since you are only able to go to the next zone once a necessary power-up is unlocked, but you probably won't feel that way since zones are so open you will be lost exploring every single part of it. And this is not a bad thing. I mean, with the amount of shit hidden all throughout the zones, even if you get lost, it normally comes with you finding a new chest and getting rewards. And most places will challenge you to reach it, demanding the use of your abilities to the fullest. I think this is what gives good pacing to the game, since there is a lot of platforming but there isn't any point where they become overbearing on the player, so it mostly serves to keep you engaged while not interacting in any form of combat. And of course, it even gives a sense of progress since the more abilities you unlock, not only new zones become reachable, but the platforming puzzles become more difficult, since they can do extensive levels that will require you to use and combine each of your abilities, creating some complex and creative routes. The zones were also really interesting. Each zone had a different team representing a role they would play in that spaceship/nation. I wasn't a first of the first zone, just as I said before, it was just too much technological for me while the game wanted to focus on other abstract ideas. But by the second zone, where they focused more on agricultural ideas and producing food, the zone had some interesting elements and visual designs, with even the boss being somewhat thematically, with her being somewhat of a bird, an animal known for spreading seeds and planting new plants, and her power of mind control, which basically created slaves so that she could use to cultivate the land. And this is not the only one that has a good team. We have archives, we have storage facilities, forges to produce weapons and armies, research labs, luxury zones, all of which make sense when trying to compress an entire nation to a spaceship, where each zone has a function in the part it plays for this expedition. I gotta say, I think how nicely every zone fit into the lore was half the reason why I enjoyed it so much. Because the story and plot elements were so much more convincing when there was a lot of in-universe and ambience built to support as things being presented. And that's it. I still need to practice on how to close out on the video, but this game was one of my favorites from last year, and I don't think it's that expensive for the quality and total playtime it presents. In fact, I do think it's totally worth the full price, but if it ever comes around on a sale, I imagine it will be a must-buy. Also, I kinda wish the game gets some big DLCs like how Hollow Knight got 2, but as a standalone game, it already impressed me. That's it, goodbye.